They're using these metal pellets through shotguns that fire them in tens of hundreds. Crimes against humanity, if I could put it simply.
Iran is weighing how far it is willing to go in its confrontation with the United States, reportedly considering attacks on U.S. military targets in Europe and even subsea fiber optic cables in the Strait of Hormuz. So has Tehran's idea of deterrence fundamentally changed? We speak with Dr. Raz Zimmt, a longtime Iran watcher in Israeli military intelligence, about whether Iran now sees Hormuz and a more offensive military posture as more powerful than the bomb.
When Raza today, in his new position as the new secretary of the SNSC, the Supreme National Security Council, refers to the Strait of Hormuz as a kind of atomic bomb for Iran, this is quite extraordinary.
But first, the evidence of Iran's January crackdown still lodged inside the bodies of protesters. Trauma radiologist Dr. Raza helped treat the wounded inside Iran remotely from Los Angeles. Reviewing their scans, injuries through secure messaging and live video, she tells us what those wounds reveal and why some protesters are too afraid to seek treatment in hospitals.
This little child's face. He will never have these pellets out. He's 6 years old. He's going to live his whole life with pellets embedded in his skull, in his face, near his orbit. And again, you can't remove these. You know, your face is a rich neurovascular area. You cannot possibly remove them. And when I saw this, my immediate first thought was, this is their way of inflicting lifelong torture.
And a 46-year-old Bahá'í man in Iran sentenced to 31 years in prison after volunteering to educate vulnerable children. His oldest brother, Ramin Heyratian, joins us as the family fights to save him.
If one virtue was supposed to define a person, it's his kindness. And I'm sorry, he has always been, has had this affinity to help children.
I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Dr. Raza is a trauma and vascular interventional radiologist residing in Los Angeles, California. She remotely advises injured protesters inside of Iran, reviewing scans and wounds through secure messaging and live video. She saw patients carrying dozens, in some cases more than 100, pellets in their bodies, many of which can never safely be removed. Those fragments can leave survivors with lifelong pain and disability, but they can also become something else, a permanent medical record of the violence inflicted on them by the regime. And it also provides evidence, potentially, that can put the wounded themselves actually at risk, even further risk than what they've already suffered. Dr. Raza joins me now. Thank you so much for being here and for the work you do. You treat catastrophic trauma for a living, and you have told us that yet you weren't prepared for what you saw when it came to the patients inside of Iran, the wounded from the January uprisings. When you examined these scans and injuries, Dr. Raza, what did they reveal to you about the nature of the crackdown that, videos from the streets and pictures alone cannot tell us?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Negarjan, for having me and letting me share the story of my patients. This is really about them. So some of the things that I saw when I interviewed these patients, assessed them, and again, this was intermittent internet time. So I would talk to them about their injuries. Then we wouldn't have internet. And literally, I'm sitting here holding my breath that they're not bleeding out and dying. So just to start off with, the injury pattern is devastating itself because the tool that's being used. They're using these metal pellets through shotguns that fire them in tens of hundreds. They are meant to cause physical trauma. This is not crowd control, because crowd control you can do with tear gas, rubber pellets, etc. This is an intentional use of this weapon to inflict maximum pain, not only in the moment, but for years on. They have made these individuals' bodies their prison. So these pellets, the patterns that we saw, but they were targeted at areas where there's rich neurovascular bundles such as the neck, such as the genitalia,
Oh,
such
God.
as your torso. So we saw this pattern where, and of course, the eyes. We've heard about this in previous protests. When you have even a small fragment, a few millimeters of these pellets going into your eyes, the risk of blindness is more than 60%. More than 60%. So these pellets, just to kind of paint the picture for our audience, they are hundreds of metal pellets that get embedded in your body. They are embedded within your skin, your tendons, and as I mentioned, especially near neurovasculature. And what makes them especially dangerous and harmful is one, you can't remove them. More than 95% of these pellets cannot be safely removed because they are close to big arteries. They're close to small nerves and vessels that you safely cannot dissect. The surgeries that these patients would need to remove these pellets would be so extensive and harmful themselves. Then there's the effect that they have. Of course, there's an acute pain, but what's even more troubling is that these will cause chronic disability, chronic nerve issues, chronic pain to the point of disfigurement, to the point of people being unable to work, walk. For women who had these pellets targeted near their breast area, I had one patient and she was a new mother. She couldn't breastfeed anymore. Imagine every time you hold your baby, because these pellets are also lodged within joint spaces in your hands and near your feet. And this is an intentional pattern of injury. So this is one scope of what I saw.
Oh, that's sorry, I'm just taking time to digest it. That's really awful. You know, there's in terms of what happened in January, we haven't really been able to talk about this because so many people were killed that all of the attention, I would say, went to those that were murdered by the regime. But now you have this whole segment of a population that their lives have been changed forever, and down the road they could potentially die from their injuries, actually, and they won't even be counted towards the number of dead based on those 2 nights of the crackdown. What do you foresee? I mean, you mentioned lifelong disabilities. Tell us more about how this is going to impact their lives and some of the other patients. You mentioned the mother who can no longer breastfeed her child. Hundreds of people have been blinded. Again, that got a lot of attention during the Women Life Freedom movement. And just as many people were blinded this time around, but nobody's talking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And the thing with these pellet injuries is that I have never seen this scale. And like you mentioned before, in my day-to-day life, I cover multiple level 1 trauma centers. I see people bleeding to death with gunshot wounds, motor vehicle accidents. I do pediatric and adult trauma. And I speak with that experience, bearing that in mind. I have never seen, this is now, if you think about the thousands that were killed, multiply by several factors, because that's the amount of people who were injured by the pellets.
Wow.
And this is something that's not being talked about, and that's the most painful part of it. And so these injuries, not only, let's talk about what they cause in the long term. Infection. They're embedded in areas and in parts of your body where you are prone to getting an infection from them. This is a foreign body embedded in your body. And it's not one foreign body, it's hundreds of foreign bodies, hundreds. And each one is a nidus for infection. What's even worse is during the crackdown, the IRGC was stationed at pharmacies, at private clinics, at hospitals. These patients could not get treatment. Every patient that I saw, hundreds, every patient, they spoke to us from their home, from a neighbor's home, from a family member's home. They could not seek medical care. This is why they went through networks to communicate with us and ask us for advice and help. And the physicians are being targeted too. If you dare provide medical care to someone who's dying from this, because you're right, these pellets can hit major arteries, cause severe catastrophic bleeding that needs to be treated immediately. And if you're a physician and you're caught treating these protesters, you will be persecuted. You will be arrested, possibly executed. And there were so many stories of physicians being arrested and targeted. So apart from the acute part of it, where you can have an immediate infection, you can literally bleed out and die in your house from this. There's the chronic part of it. You have hundreds of these fragments embedded in your hands, in the joint spaces. That was a common area of injury that we saw in their hands, in their shoulders. And this is intentional. This pattern is not coincidental. It is intentionally inflicted to cause maximum amount of pain, injury throughout your life. Every time you bend your finger, you're going to feel that pellet and it's going to cause pain. You're going to have chronic inflammation. You're going to need to be on steroids to manage the chronic inflammation. You're going to need to be on opioids. One of the biggest fears that myself and other trauma physicians who saw this, and me personally interviewing these patients, is you're creating a generation of people in chronic pain and potentially creating a generation of opiate dependence. Because there's no way, if you can imagine when you get a little splinter in your foot, how much that hurts, and you can't wait to get it out. Imagine you have hundreds of these pellets all over your body. And one of the most painful cases I remember was a young boy, 6 years old. And he was in the protest. Again, these are peaceful protesters marching in the streets for their right for freedom. He was injured during the protest, physical injuries, bruising, etc. And the pellets hit his face, this little child's face. He will never have these pellets out. He's 6 years old. He's going to live his whole life with pellets embedded in his skull, in his face, near his orbit. And again, you can't remove these. You know, your face is a rich neurovascular area. You cannot possibly remove them. And when I saw this, my immediate first thought was, this is their way of inflicting lifelong torture. This is making someone's body a prison. This is inflicting the kind of pain and torture that even if the IRGC never sees you or touches you, this torture will last forever. It's just devastating. And one of the saddest things that I saw as this was unfolding was there wasn't any real outcry from the international community over this. And just like white phosphorus and previously sarin, these are chemical warfare agents. Anytime they're used or there's a thought that this country is going to use them, etc., throughout the world, there's massive international outcry. Don't you dare. That's a red line. I hope, I pray, the more we talk about these pellet injuries, these shotgun birdshot pellet injuries, that this becomes a red line. This then becomes, don't you dare think about doing this to civilians. Don't you dare. That's my hope. Yeah.
To target a little boy. I mean, this is cruelty on next level, and with the work that you're doing to not only help these patients, these people, these kids, grandparents, all people from all walks of life, but also to document the crimes. If you were, you're becoming part of the process, I believe, in creating that red line. I truly do believe that. And number two, if you were to testify, if we saw the fall of the Islamic Republic, or if one of their officials were caught in Western Europe or somewhere in the Western world, what would you testify in court? What would that be like for you? What would you say?
Crimes against humanity. If I could put it simply, crimes against humanity to inflict the greatest amount of damage and torture, not only in one point of time, but throughout someone's life. What worse form of torture is there? They have marked these people for life, hundreds of thousands of people. And the other point I would bring up is something that you alluded to earlier. These are metal fragments. They can easily be detected with an X-ray, with a metal detector if someone's going through an airport, through their normal route of commute. And that was one of the greatest concerns of our patients, which was that even if I hide in my home and they try to come look, which they did, they went out into people's homes to try to find protesters and people. they can find these individuals years down the line because they can detect metal fragments easily with a little metal detector, handheld metal detector. So one of the other points I would bring is that they have intentionally marked these people for persecution later on to easily be identified. Their wounds, their injuries have now become identifying markers for attack and targeted persecution later. And I think that's a extremely important, relevant point to be made because in other instances of crowd control or damage that's inflicted on people, I personally have never seen this component come into play. And one of the biggest things I would testify to as well is the multi-generational trauma that the IRGC has inflicted. I have one patient, 16-year-old boy, only breadwinner in his family. His mother passed away. His father is in his 70s, cancer patient. This boy, and amongst his cousins and younger siblings, was the only one who was working. He's in construction in Iran. When he got injured, not only was he injured with these pellets that we're talking about, but they were going into the crowds and hitting and striking people with machete-like objects. He had a huge laceration, if you can see my hand, throughout his hand, cutting down to the tendons. This 16-year-old, you know what his biggest concern was when I videoed him?
What?
How am I going to feed my family? Not my injury, not that I'm bleeding out, not that I'm in severe pain. He not once complained about his pain. It was like, doctor, what can I do so I can go back to work? I need to feed my father. I need to buy him medicine, chemotherapy medicine. And one of the more important points I want to make is that in Iran, these medications are made there. You can't just try to ship it in or anything. So these individuals, they have to work and generate income to buy life-saving medications. And imagine the pain this child, 16-year-old is a child, that he felt at the anguish that he can't no longer afford chemotherapy medication for his father. This is the multi-generational, physical, psychological trauma that they have inflicted. And I hope one day there is justice for this. And physicians, especially that I work for the NGO Physicians for Human Rights, they've won the Nobel Peace Prize previously, and for exactly this kind of work, to testify about these injuries, to present forensic medical evidence, to show that even if justice comes decades later, we can still talk about these patterns of injuries and explain in detail what occurred to cause them.
I'm speechless. Dr. Raza, I'm truly, truly speechless to know the amount, the level of brutality, and like you said, how people are not paying attention to this. You know, you see some talk about, and we're all guilty of it, you know, the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices, whatnot, and the reality of what is happening inside of Iran. I think that people, even inside Iran, don't, in certain kind of levels of society or bubbles, are not necessarily aware of what is happening. And the fact that you're doing this and documenting this is so crucial. And I thank you so much for your work. Is there any final thoughts that you have that you'd like for the audience to know?
I really want my audience to picture themselves being these patients. They are human beings with lives, with babies, with mothers, with fathers, with cancer, with every other human ailment and condition that we live with. And now on top of that, their bodies have become their prisons. The pain that they are chronically in, the fact that they can't seek medical treatment, the fact that they will live with this torture forever, constant torture. I truly hope the audience remembers them and advocates on their behalf. They cannot be forgotten. I will not forget them. I will be the vessel for their voice, and I hope other people will too. These people deserve to be heard. Their pain deserves to be heard and turned into advocacy and change. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you again, Dr. Raza, for helping to treat the wounded from afar who risk imprisonment or even the death penalty, execution, for seeking the basic universal right of medical care, but also for helping to preserve the medical evidence of what was done to them. Their bodies are now forever proof of the brutality of the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime, and ensuring that this evidence, and in doing so, their stories are not erased. For years, Iran pursued a strategy of getting close to a nuclear weapon without actually building one, believing nuclear threshold capability could help deter its enemies. But 2 wars with Israel and the United States have put that assumption to the test. And now the question inside Tehran may be changing from whether Iran needs a bomb to something more fundamental. What actually works as deterrence? Dr. Raz Zimmt has spent decades studying Iran's leadership as a longtime Israeli military intelligence. He now directs the Iran and Shiite Axis research program at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies. His new report examines the debate unfolding inside Tehran over Iran's nuclear doctrine and what the wars may have taught the Islamic Republic about protecting itself from another attack. Thank you so much for being here, Roz. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nagar. It's
Of course, I wanted
to be
to.
here. And by the way,
Likewise.
congratulations on a well-deserved journalism award.
Thank you so much, Roz. I'm very humbled. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to start with Mohsen Rezaei. He was the former commander-in-chief of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now he's returned to a central role in Iran's national security establishment. And he said that the Strait of Hormuz is more important than dozens of atomic bombs. After what Iran has managed to do with Hormuz, of course, could Tehran conclude that it has found a more effective and usable form of deterrence than actually pursuing or building a nuclear bomb? But, and this is a big one, doesn't Iran risk depreciating that weapon the longer it uses it? Of course, President Trump has come out talking about the depreciation of Hormuz. The UAE is accelerating a pipeline capacity to Fujairah outside the strait. Saudi Arabia can move crude west to the Red Sea. Iraq is exploring routes through the Mediterranean. And Iran itself is suffering economically. It affects, even things like the import of food to the country. So I guess my question, Raz, is, has Iran discovered an extraordinarily powerful deterrent that becomes less powerful the longer it uses it? And what does that mean in terms of Iran's deterrence strategy?
So, Nagar, this is quite a complicated issue, as you probably imagine. And it's very interesting that you mentioned Mohsen Rezaei, because for those of you, in the audience who do not remember, Mohsen Rezaei was actually the first real commander of the Revolutionary Guards. He was not the first commander, but he was in this position for the longest period during the 1980s and then the 1990s. And I remember back in 1987, when there was a debate going on in Iran under Ayatollah Khomeini, whether to accept the ceasefire with Iraq after almost 8 years of war. And then, if you remember, then the speaker of the Majlis, Rafsanjani, turned out to Rezaei, and he tried to convince him that he would convince Ayatollah Khomeini to put an end to this war. And Mohsen Rezaei actually published a letter, or sent a letter to Ayatollah Khomeini, where he actually said that if he would be given as the commander of the Revolutionary Guards, I think it was 5 years and billions of US dollars, and he could use that in order to develop advanced weapons, including, by the way, atomic nuclear device. It will be able for Iran to win this war. And so when Rezaei today, in his new position as the new secretary of the SNSC, the Supreme National Security Council, refers to the Strait of Hormuz as a kind of atomic bomb for Iran, this is quite extraordinary. But there are different voices in Iran. And while some certainly say that, and I'll get back to that, we've seen more and more voices over the last 2 or 3 years in Iran actually saying that the only ultimate deterrence Iran can have in order to deter its adversaries, most importantly Israel and the United States, is breaking out to a nuclear weapon. Others suggest that this is certainly not the solution. And I think that both sides recognize the complexity of this issue. So on the one side, those who support breaking out a nuclear weapon, by the way, including Mujtaba Khamenei, and we will get back to him in a moment, they say that what happened actually in the Middle East over the last 2 or 3 years was one, that the so-called pro-Iranian axis in the region, the axis of resistance, weakened very significantly due to the fact that Israel was very much engaged in trying to undermining this axis. Most importantly, of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so Iran actually cannot use, at least for now, those regional proxies in order to deter Israel. And in addition, with all due respect to the ballistic missiles capabilities Iran still has, they were also unable to deter Israel and the United States. And so on the one hand, you can certainly hear more and more voices, even before the 12-day war and this recent war, suggesting that if Iran really wants to get a deterrence, sufficient deterrence, it has to move forward towards a nuclear weapon. On the other hand, there are those who suggest that it's very risky. Iran has other opportunities to use in order to deter its enemies, and they also give several examples for countries who have nuclear weapons or are considered to have nuclear weapons and were actually attacked during the last few years.
Yeah, you brought up in your report India and Pakistan as an example, both nuclear powers, but that didn't prevent military escalation from happening between both countries. So how important are those voices when you categorize those that are for pursuing a nuclear bomb and those that are against it? And how would you categorize it? Because, I mean, for so many years, the discussion around Iran has been reformist versus hardliner, but now you have divisions within the hardliners itself after the wars.
Right. And by the way, there are also those who can be defined as pragmatists or even reformists.
Yeah.
Who adopt a more security-oriented approach, saying that perhaps it is a good idea to break out, although most of the reformists or most of the pragmatists pay more attention to the need to avoid, at least for now, any other risks, especially with the United States, and to put more emphasis on trying to recover from the economic point of view. But I agree with you. Even within the hardliners, there are voices who say, especially after this war, saying, look, we still have our ability to use the axis of resistance. Yes, they are not as strong as they used to be, but still, as we all know, Iran managed to force Israel into a new equation by making this linkage between what's going on in Iran and what's going on in Lebanon. And so there are some in Iran say, look, if we can retaliate even to Israeli attacks in Beirut by striking Israel with our ballistic missiles, and the ballistic missiles certainly serve as a very efficient deterrence towards Israel, why should we need nuclear weapon? And those who say we have other options on the table, and here again we go back to the Strait of Hormuz. And I will certainly say that after so many years of Iranian threats to close the Strait of Hormuz, when finally they did that and implemented the threats, I think that in a way the Iranians, I can say, fell in love with this idea. I think it's too early to say whether this was a right decision by Iran to do that. And we're recording this program on only less than 24 hours after President Trump said that a new phase of economic campaign against Iran begins, and that the Strait of Hormuz is actually partially open due to the efforts made by CENTCOM in the Strait of Hormuz. But I think that still the Iranian leadership, and we have to say this new leadership in Iran seems to be very self-confident, much bolder, and I would say even revenge-driven, especially Mujtaba Khamenei, seems to adopt this narrative that finally they managed to gain this strategic achievements by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, or even by threatening to disrupt the traffic in Hormuz, and that by itself is more than enough to deter their enemies, even when and if and when this war is over.
And when it comes to Iran's, I guess, so-called new leadership, this supreme leader that has not been seen or heard from, and we've got this shuffle of the Iran security establishment with kind of the old guard of the IRGC, they've been talking about an offensive doctrine, not a defensive doctrine. And Iran is reportedly weighing attacking U.S. military targets in Europe, assets in Bulgaria, in Cyprus, and separately examine targeting subsea fiber optic cables in the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, we should mention that a lot of those fiber optics, I mean, it helps connect those Gulf countries with the rest of Asia and Europe, as well as financial transactions go through there. But there are a lot of redundancies when it comes to the optics of that. But, you know, just what does it mean, Raz, an offensive doctrine in practice? What would that look like? Are they creating more threats, or they actually go through with this? Are they more emboldened, like you said, because of whatever success that they've had, at least now, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz?
I think it's more than threats. I mean, first of all, we all remember what the Iranians did in 2019. A year after President Trump decided to withdraw from the JCPOA. And as we all remember, during the first year after he made this decision, Iran actually adopted the policy they refer to as the strategic patience. But after less than a year, they reached the conclusion that the maximum pressure policy really imposes a lot of pain and damage to the Iranian economy. And then they shifted their policy, and we saw that in the sabotage efforts against vessels in the Gulf, then the downing of the U.S. Drone in the Persian Gulf, and the peak was, of course, the strike carried out by the Iranian Air Force against Saudi Arabia. So what we see today is that after several years in which it seemed that the Iranians were more, I would say, reactive. Even when we go back to the Iranian decision, which was very dramatic and very significant in April 2024. For the first time, they launched missile and drones attack against Israel after many years in which the confrontation between Israel and Iran was carried out either by Iranian proxies in the region, Hezbollah or Hamas or the PIJ in Gaza, or by covert activities carried out by Israel. At some point, it moved to the Syrian theater, but not direct missiles being launched by Iran and Israel. But even this Iranian decision to do that in April 2024 and then in October 2024 was made because of an Israeli decision to strike in April the high-ranking IRGC general in Syria in what was supposed to be a diplomatic compound near the Iranian embassy in Damascus. So it was also a kind of a reaction by Iran to do that. And as we all remember, the use of Iranian proxies for many years, especially in the last decade or so, has been a part of what the Iranians considered to be forward defense strategy. But that was also, in a way, a reactive Iranian position. What we see today, and I think it goes back to what I said about the self-confident Iranian leadership and the fact that they're very much concerned with the possibility that no matter what happens, and regardless of what concessions the Iranians are ready to give to President Trump, the assessment currently in Tehran, I think, is that at the end of the day, perhaps after the midterm election in November, President Trump will return to military hostilities against Iran. And so when you look, for example, at the recent appointments made in the top Iranian military and security apparatus and the decisions which were made in the military, you can certainly say that it's not just the adoption of a more proactive and offensive doctrine, but I think that they're ready. They're certainly trying to become more and more ready for the possibility of another round of war with Iran. Let me just give you one example. When a decision was made in the last few days, last week, to merge the general command of the Iranian armed forces with the Khatem al-Anbiya emergency command, that was certainly a decision which was made in order to prepare the ground to better deal with the possibility of an ongoing military confrontation with the United States. So I think it's very clear that it's not just statements, it's not just the fact that we see more and more demands raised by the Iranian leadership as preconditions to open the Strait of Hormuz. It's also the continued efforts by the Iranian regime to learn the lessons after two campaigns against Israel and the United States, and to better prepare themselves for the possibility of an ongoing confrontation with either Israel or the United States.
What lessons did they learn, Raz, and what are they able to do then against the United States and Israel? I mean, the American administration would tell you that they have, decimated Iran's proxy capabilities, their military capabilities, and that they don't have much left. What would you say to those types of comments?
Well, when you look at the 3 or 4 main strategic objectives of both Israel and the United States, a regime change, then to dismantle or to destroy as much as possible Iran's ballistic missiles capabilities, then to dismantle as much as possible Iran's proxies capabilities. And then from the Israeli point of view, the number one priority was, of course, to dismantle the remains of the nuclear program after the 12-day war. It's very clear today, whether we like it or not, we certainly don't like that in Israel, that those objectives were not achieved. And the Iranians realized that. If you would ask me at the beginning of the war, of this war, what would be considered as a success by the Islamic Republic, I would probably say just to survive. If they manage to survive this war against Israel and the United States, they will certainly consider that as a major achievement. Unfortunately, it's not just that they managed to survive, they managed to gain very strategic achievements. The most important ones, of course, the decision to close the Strait of Hormuz. And the second one is to inflict major damage to their neighbors in the Gulf. And so I think that the conclusion in Iran is that the United States and Israel don't have the capability to force Iran into major concessions. And the other conclusion, and I think it certainly increased over the last few weeks since the MOU collapsed, is that President Trump doesn't really want to go back to war with Iran. And so on the one hand, there is an assessment that we the Iranians certainly cannot trust President Trump. And even if we agree to certain concessions, at the end of the day, he might make a decision to go back to war. But at least for now, he is constrained. He is constrained by the lack of ammunition in the United States, the lack of interceptors and missiles. He is constrained by the economic global markets. He is constrained by the political consideration related to the midterm elections in November. And he is also concerned because there are many players in the region, for example, MBS, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, and also the UAE, who certainly don't want the US to go back to hostilities because they know they are going to pay the price for that. And so when taking together with the sense of self-confidence, and I would say even a success and victory characterizing this new leadership in Tehran, we get to the conclusion that if they have to make a choice between taking the risk for a new round of war with the United States or making concessions, which they consider to be full capitulation to the United States and losing their ability to consolidate their gains within the negotiations and future negotiation, I think it's very clear that they are not going to give up, because from their point of view, there is only one worse option than risking in another round of war, and that's that they will end up with a kind of a ceasefire, which again will be only a temporary one.
And like you mentioned, Trump appears to be stepping back now. He's more focused on the economic pressure, which in and of itself, like you said, will likely lead to war come the midterms. But I wanted to ask you, is Israel's objective or end game the same as that of the United States? So what is the end game right now of Israel? And Iran is a country of 90 million people they still have residual military capabilities. They've got the Strait of Hormuz, an enormous security apparatus. Is there concern in Israel that collapsing the state will not necessarily destroy the Islamic Republic itself? And in other words, is there a danger, Raz, of confusing the ability to repeatedly weaken Iran, the Islamic Republic, with the ability to determine what Iran becomes afterward?
Look, I think that one of the lessons learned in Israel after the 12-day war was that it's going to be almost impossible to solve the so-called Iranian problem or the Iranian threats when it comes to Iran's nuclear program, Iran's ballistic missiles capabilities, Iran's proxies capabilities, with continued rounds of military efforts. At the end of the day, I think that everyone in Israel realized that the only real solution to this problem is a regime change in Iran. Unfortunately, and this has been my assessment for many years now, is that a regime change in Iran, which is certainly something we would all wish for, is 80 or 90% depending on the Iranian people. And you can't do that through certainly not aerial strikes, but also not through the plans which were orchestrated and not implemented at the end of the day by the Mossad, as we saw during this war, including the use of Kurdish separatists, and of course this very flawed plan to take former President Ahmadinejad and hoping that he would create some kind of chaos as a transition towards a new leadership in Iran. I think that there is a growing understanding in Israel that it's going to be very, very difficult to topple the Iranian regime, certainly through military efforts or campaign. So that doesn't mean, of course, that Israel will not continue to try and convince mostly the United States, but also the international community, to put more pressure on Iran in order to try and weaken the Iranian regime as much as possible. But I think that from the Israeli point of view, the two main priorities right now seems to be, one, the nuclear program. And the nuclear program, we have to say, and that goes back to what we discussed earlier concerning the growing motivation in Iran to break out. Israel is very much concerned with the fact that this war could certainly end without any solution to the nuclear issue. And here I think we can certainly see differences of opinions between Washington and Jerusalem. I think that if at some point the issue of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be resolved, in any kind of way, the concern in Israel is that President Trump at this point might declare victory and will say, okay, we have very good intelligence, we will be able to detect any decision made by Tehran to break out, and he won't address this issue as a precondition to end the war. At this point, Israel, unfortunately, there is nothing Israel can do, because we know that there was this plan which was discussed in the media to use special operation forces, boots on the ground, in order to try and extract the fissile material, the enriched uranium, out of the underground compound. At the end of the day, it wasn't implemented, and so Israel will have to readdress this issue. And the second issue, which was not even part of the MOU signed between the United States and Iran, is of course the ballistic missiles capabilities. And here again, despite all the damage caused to the military industries and the production lines which might be able to make it more difficult for the Iranians to recover or reconstitute their ballistic missiles, it's very clear that at the end of the day, they will manage to do that. So I think that right now, from the Israeli point of view, if the options on the table is one to have some kind of agreement between between Iran and the United States, which would certainly include some kind of economic benefits, which would strengthen the Iranian regime, this is something which Israel would certainly resist. On the other hand, if we go back, or if the US goes back to a war with Iran, which doesn't address the issue of the nuclear program in Iran, from the Israeli point of view, there are doubts whether it's worthwhile. So I would certainly argue that at the current situation, the best option on the table from the Israeli official point of view is to continue the current growing pressure on Iran, the naval blockade, more sanctions, hoping that at the end of the day, it will force Iran into making more concessions, or even better, that it will resume the protest movement in Iran. I have to say, I'm not sure that this is what we should expect.
Is there anything you'd like to conclude, Raz? Any final thoughts?
I think that we have been discussing the economic pressure in recent days, and I'm certainly not against that. I actually think that at the present, perhaps this is the only option on the table. But we always have to remember that economic pressure on Iran is the tool. This is not the final strategic objective. The objective is either to change the political regime in Iran, but again, as I said, this seems to be more unlikely at present, and certainly depends on the Iranian people rather than on what the US and Israel will decide to do, or to change the Iranian policy. And I think that when you look at what was happening in Iran over the last few weeks and months, I think it's more likely that if the Iranians reach the conclusion that they can't resist, or they can't handle the growing economic pressure, their decision would actually be to escalate things even further before returning to negotiations and perhaps to the MOU.
Yeah, and there's a lot of external factors. You've got the midterms in the U.S., you've got elections in October in Israel. And of course, as much as the Iranian regime is preparing for another round of strikes between the U.S. and Israel, they're also really preparing potentially for combat against the people of Iran if, like you said, there are more uprisings in the coming months ahead. Thank you so much, Raz, for joining us today on Eye for Iran. I really enjoyed our discussion today.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
For decades, Iran's Bahá'í community has faced systemic persecution, barred from public sector jobs, denied access to higher education, and imprisoned for activities as basic as teaching and serving communities throughout Iran. Now, 46-year-old Afshin Heyratian has been sentenced, a combined sentence that has led to 31 years in prison. His family says his supposed crime was volunteering with an organization that provides education to unhoused and working children. His case comes amid a broader crackdown in Iran, and Baha'is have often found themselves on the front lines of repression before tactics used against them spread more broadly and widely across Iranian society. Afshin is now appealing his case, and his family is racing to draw international attention to help him. His oldest brother, Ramin Heyratian, joins me now. Thank you so much, Ramin John, for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramin. Before we talk about this, I mean, it's 31 years. My God, it's an extraordinary sentence in the worst possible way. Tell me about your brother. Who is Afshin, and what was he? His causes. What was he devoted to? Tell us a little bit about him and how you and your family are coping and feeling right now. I'm so sorry.
Thanks for doing this. It's very much appreciated. Afshin is truly like, if one virtue was supposed to define a person, is his kindness. And I'm sorry.
No.
He has always been, has had this affinity to help children, particularly children, and to care for those who are in need. He has always been like that from early childhood. And during the last decade or so, even more than a decade, he has been involved with this NGO, which are dedicated. It's called the Anjuman Defa az Kudakan, which means the Society for Protection of Children. And they mainly teach, they have a school in Tehran, and they teach children who are basically labor kids, as well as those kids who do not have a status in Iran. For instance, Afghani kids who don't have a birth certificate, or children who have been born out of wedlock that did not get and things of the people with the statuses that are like that. So he's truly his work has been to just help them, and he's just a volunteer there. He wasn't a status employee, so to speak. His work over there was from anything from even painting rooms or fixing tables and chairs, but mainly being with kids and playing with them and making them happy. That was his passion. So that's Afshin for you. And he's been doing this every day, like as a full-time job. Every morning, my mom said that he would wake up at 6 o'clock and go and come back when it was done. And the school was closed.
And how are you feeling? How is your mother feeling? You have an 80-year-old mother. You mentioned to me over the phone, a cancer survivor.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, is this her youngest child too?
Yes.
Is Afshin?
Yeah.
The baby of the family. How
Yeah.
is everyone doing? I mean, Afshin sounds like such an amazing person, and not only serving humanity and for his kindness, especially with Iran's most vulnerable population, but also a fighter, somebody who could have easily left the country and just lived a life for himself, but chose to stay and to do something. I really admire people like that who decide, you know what, I'm not leaving Iran despite the circumstances. Because you hear so many people say, oh, why did the Baha'is of Iran stay? Why did the Jews of Iran stay? Well, because why should they leave? They're there, and they're there to help their people.
Yes, exactly. And this affinity in all of these individuals that you're naming, in terms of they truly love Iran and Iranians. Afshin actually came out of Iran for a while in early 2000s, and he came to US as well, but he really did not like it, and he went back. And he was imprisoned. This is his third time that he's been in prison, and yeah, like it was always this affinity for loving Iran and being with family, and especially with my mother, and also being in an environment that he was really comfortable helping, and he wanted to do that. That was his passion. For his work, like the reason he came to US, basically, he's a playwright and a screenwriter as well.
Wow,
but
creative.
But he has never been acknowledged for his work. So he has his friends who he actually helps and writes for them, and then they do the productions without his name, because his name has been marked by the Islamic Republic all this time. Yeah.
Wow. And tell us a little bit about, for people who don't understand what Baha'is go through. We mentioned in the intro, Baha'is are barred from even getting a higher education. They can't go to university. They can't be teachers. They can't have any public sector jobs. Yeah. Tell us about Afshin's work in terms of, like, with the children, and how this became the basis for such a serious crime, if you will, under the Islamic Republic. Just provide some context for people who don't know.
So basically all Baha'is in Iran, in one way or another, they have been restricted or oppressed. And to be honest, this part of oppression that has been created just because of and that goes with the name Bahá'í, which is a follower of Baha'u'llah. And it has been some sort of a huge dogma for these people to control and limit people that are with that sort of even mentality, not even if they call themselves a Baha'i, but if they follow the teachings of Baha'u'llah. So that has become somehow, as you were mentioning, all of these things that the Baha'is cannot do, including those, is that, for instance, Baha'is cannot be in food productions because they are considered unclean. So, and then because of that, there is very, very limited things that the Baha'is can do in Iran. And because of that, there is a lot of pressure on them to be pushed out of the society one way or another. But as you can see, the Baha'is follow this constructive resilience. They stay, they do their best to help, whatever they can do, however they can do it. And to be honest, from one point, we have to realize that one of the major teachings of Baha'u'llah is that we do not get ourselves involved in politics. So from that point of view, we are not against any governments, including government of Iran. They are doing whatever they do, but what we do what we have to do. And we obey the government. For instance, when during the Ayatollah Khomeini's time, he stopped the administrative work in Baha'i faith in Iran, the whole administration shut down, and we have not had an administration since then. All the community
because you were following the rules of whatever the country happens to be. And Afshin is so young; he's just 46. God forbid if he does serve the 31 years as has been handed to him, he would be 77 years old by the time he gets out of prison.
Yes.
Tell me, is this unprecedented even for the Baha'i community?
So far it has been. So far it has been. We haven't, I don't think we had any of the Baha'is. Of course, there has been recently, very recently, one or two cases that they have talked about probably a life sentence. But to be honest, like as you mentioned, with the at Afshin's age, this can be a life sentence.
Yeah.
And things that they have attached to those charges, for instance, colluding against the government and gathering more than two people to talk about against the government, or teaching things that are against the Sharia of Islam, the law of Islamic law, and those are, first of all, completely untrue. The NGO that he's volunteering at is actually a licensed NGO by the Islamic Republic to function in Iran. They closed the school in I think October 15th, and they came to our house. They confiscated everybody's cell phones and all that. And then they came to our house. They confiscated, again, all our cell phones, tablets, computers, everything. And then, as well as all the Baha'i literature, all the Baha'i books, all the Baha'i pictures that was on the walls. And they took everything.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Ramin. This is awful. And there's something that we repeatedly see in Iran, and that is forms of repression are often first tested against Baha'is and other vulnerable minorities inside the Islamic Republic before being used more broadly against, the population in Iran. Do you see what is happening to your younger brother, as part of a much bigger warning about where repression is headed right now in the midst of the stalemate, war might be happening again between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, and etc.?
I'm not sure if I'm in a position to actually comment on that, because to be honest, I don't follow the politics and the war the way it is. Because there is such a big machinery behind it that sometimes I feel like I really don't understand this.
But not necessarily about the war, but it's in it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
At the same time, that said, I feel like the whole people, all the people of Iran, are being oppressed.
Yeah, of course.
Because these sort of things are happening. And again, Islamic Republic, it seems that they are using all of these things as excuses to even oppress the whole entirety of the population of Iran. And also those people particularly who want to do good and be a positive source in Iran. So
Exactly. They don't want Iran to get better.
exactly.
That's for sure.
Exactly. So that's how I feel, but I don't want to give you any sort of what you call like a political commentary on that, because
Yeah.
I don't know if I really grasp the depth of the whole situation. There
No,
are
I understand what
certain
you're saying.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain things that are happening that I'm not 100% sure how it is. For instance, we were talking to a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and I was saying it's interesting to me that nobody talks about the plight of Iranians and the situation in Iran in the news media, while all of these atrocities and all these killings and, things are happening and people are going to prison for no good reason.
Yeah.
And they're being sentenced unjustly for no good reason, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
And it
I was
seems
talking
that it's
to
carrying on.
exactly.
Yes. So, yes, please.
No, I was going to say last 2 weeks ago, I was talking to former UN prosecutor Professor Payam Akhavan just about
Yes.
that, and we were talking about how basically a lot of people in kind of the Western world, if the perpetrators are not Trump and Netanyahu, then they in some ways just ignore it, and that is what has become of this so-called progressive left. And so
Mhm.
when it's the Islamic Republic who are the perpetrators, it's not given the same light as when it's coming from the US or Israel, for example, and it's happening maybe for political reasons, unfortunately. And the Iranians are innocent, are suffering in the midst of whatever, is happening between the media and world powers and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about Afshin's case right now? Where is it at? How are you able to, if you're safe to say, how is anybody able to communicate with him? Is he allowed any visits? How is he doing, if you have any information?
He's keeping his spirit up for sure, but my mom feels like that he's keeping face for my mom's sake. My mom is allowed to go and visit every once every 2 or 3 weeks. And then he's allowed to call her every day. And he calls every day at 9 o'clock and talks to my mom. Um, he originally, as I said, like in October 15th, he was interrogated at the school. And then they came to our house on November 11th and they arrested him. After that, he was in solitary confinement for 34 days. 2 weeks after he was in prison, and we didn't know where he was. Actually, 10 days after he was in solitary confinement, they allowed him a phone call to my mother to get the deed of the house ready to let him go as a collateral, to go on a probation type. And then 4 days after that, one of his friends that was in prison, he had seen him, but Afshin apparently was blindfolded or whatever. Afshin had not seen him. Came out with the deed of their house or whatever, and he had told my mom that I saw Afshin in there.
No.
But he didn't see me. So after that, he was there for for over 260 days without any charge. And then when my mom has been going back and forth between 3 cities, somehow they were saying kept on saying that his what you call his file is on such and such city's court, and then the other one, which was in the east of Tehran, and then there was one in the court in Fardis and in Tehran. So they were sending her back and forth almost every day for
So
all
cruel.
these 260 days to find out what can we do. And they were not, although they had gotten the deed of the house for appraisal, they were not actually accepting it and releasing him on bail. So
she had this hope that maybe he would be released, and that even that hope was taken away from her and the rest of your family. That's how cruel.
Exactly. And then the other side of it was that, they were telling her that he's not allowed to have his own lawyer. And that originally they were saying that they are going to assign a lawyer of their own to his case. And we were waiting for that to come out. And finally, one of these days, one of his friends from the prison had called his family members to tell them that they have taken Afshin to court.
Wow.
And they were supposed to let us know when the court was happening 10 days before it, but they never did. And then they called my mom while she was going to her to her oncologist appointment. So in the middle of metro, she got out and called my my sister-in-law, and my niece went and picked her up and took her to the court. And when she got there, they told her that he's not here. You have to wait outside until he comes. So she was saying that she was waiting in the hallways, going back and forth and up and down to see where he is, and because they're supposed to bring him in. And then my niece had parked the car and came back, and where they were talking, she hears my brother saying Allahu Akbar, which is a Bahá'í greeting, from behind her. Turns around, he's coming out of the court, already sentenced, or rather already been arraigned with the charges. So, and he had basically plead innocent, and he had absolutely no legal representation that they had promised that they would assign to him. So he was basically his own lawyer. The court was closed. There was nobody else in there. And then afterwards, he had asked my mom of how she's doing and stuff. And my mom had asked, how are you doing? And he said, I'm okay. Don't worry about it. We'll be fine.
Like a
I'm
good
going
son
to
would.
appeal. Yeah. And then then my mom was asking, so what are the next steps? What can we do? They had said, oh, you can't do anything. We are waiting for the vote or the judgment of the judge. Well, they used vote, but there was no jury,
Of
nothing.
course.
So, and then my mom was saying, so, what can we do? What are the next steps? They said, okay, in about 10 days, you will hear the sentence. And then you have 20 days to appeal. So, they gave the sentence in about a week after. And the sentence was 31 years plus 300 million in penalties. And then after which my mom was able to retain a lawyer, and the lawyer for this appeal process. And the lawyer had a chance to look at his file. They only allowed him 10 minutes to look at his entire file, the lawyer.
Unbelievable.
So,
Unbelievable.
and then, so we are waiting for the appeal court and all that. But meanwhile, an innocent person is in prison all this time.
I'm so sorry. To conclude, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything that you'd like to get out there that you'd like for the world to hear from you?
I really hope that people of Iran, particularly all those who are active in trying to ascertain the freedom of Iran, will be able to do that and to see a future for themselves. Because with this, at this stage, all there is oppression, and all there is feeling of nothingness for the people in Iran, which is really, really sad. And this is a country that has been a source of knowledge, security, and love for the whole world. It has been. And as Baha'is, we believe, because Baha'u'llah has appeared in Iran and from Iran, we believe that the future of Iran is absolutely brilliant. We believe that with all our heart. And it's not just the Baha'is, Iranian Baha'is, but even the Western Baha'is and Eastern Baha'is, they all believe that. And we are hoping for that to happen soon, for all the people of Iran to be liberated, so they can actually show their true potential for the well-being of the whole entire world.
And I do too believe in a future like that for Iran, and it's thanks to people like you and your brother. And I wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you so very much, Negarjan. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, if you like this episode, you can hit the like button. You can also leave us a comment. Let us know what you think, what you'd like to see for future episodes and guests. You can also sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. And don't forget to check out our dedicated English website at Iran